You've been waiting for this since February 6th. Football season is almost here, and there's no better way to get closer to the game you love than with DraftKings 1 Week Fantasy Football. I play it all the time. Absolutely love it. To celebrate, DraftKings is hosting a $100,000 contest that is totally free to enter. And if you draft the perfect lineup, you can win $1 billion. That's with a B. With DraftKings, there are many ways to play. Choose between public contests with big cash prizes or private contests where you can compete against a group of your friends. DraftKings also has beginner and casual contests where you'll play against people of similar skill level. The best part is you get to draft a new team each week without any commitment. So get to DraftKings.com now and use the promo code REPLAY to play the DraftKings free Week 1 contest with $100,000 in total prizes. And if you draft the perfect lineup, you can win $1 billion. That's promo code REPLAY to play for your shot to win $1 billion Week 1. The contest, totally free to enter. Why wouldn't you try? DraftKings, the game inside the game. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for all the details.
Home isn't just a place. It's a feeling. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, ADT helps keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance. So you can feel at home, wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling. ADT. Home. Safe home.
This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. Subscribe now by going to the Listen tab in the ESPN app.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
Back in better than ever. Good morning. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. College football is upon us, and that is just the tip of the iceberg on this full-scale football Friday. We've got LaMelo's Lambeau. We've got a Supreme Court justice in the judges' chambers. We've got Tiger Woods hitting a golf ball.
Yes.
What a morning to be alive, Golic. Let's do this.
Whole lot of stuff going on. LaMelo and his Lambo and his shoes.
Yeah.
We got a whole lot going on with him, huh?
Listen.
To be a junior in high school.
And to get a Lamborghini for your 16th birthday, which is going to obscure the fact so many people, I think, are going to be so turned off by the notion of a 16-year-old driving a Lamborghini that they are going to miss the forest for the trees, which is that should have absolutely nothing to do with his college eligibility, and neither should the fact that he has a new shoe now in his likeness worth $395, of which he should get to keep the money if anyone buys it. Now, I don't know why anyone would buy it, but if you would buy it, he should be allowed to sell it.
What you think and what the NCAA thinks could be two different things. We will see.
I'm right and they're wrong.
I know. Believe me, I spent 18 years of this. I know. You're right.
You can't possibly tell me that you think that the fact that they are selling a shoe.
I didn't say that I agree with it. I just said it's the rule. I don't like driving 55 miles an hour.
Right.
But if I get pulled over doing 65, I got to pay the fine. Okay? I'd love it to not be 55, and I love it when I'm in places when it's 65 or 70.
So when are they going to change this?
I don't know.
And when are they going to take this ridiculous nonsense and change it?
I don't know, because then it's going to open up. It's going to the thought process is what it opens up. What it opens up then to what kids will get offered to come to schools. And if it doesn't open up Pandora's box to just craziness, the wild, wild west of offering kids this kind of deal or that kind of deal. That's one of the things they're afraid of. So I don't know the answer.
What do we carve out a little exception to the rule for 16-year-olds who have a shoe with their name on it?
I mean, just think about it. Everybody says he has a brand. Anybody could do it. If you got money, you can make a shoe for your kid in high school and say he's got a shoe.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Just because he has a shoe doesn't mean you have to buy it.
Exactly.
So he might sell 4 LaMelos.
Right.
Or he might sell 4,000 or 4 million. I don't know. The point is that's his business, and they're going all in on this reality. If you're wondering what this is about, this is all about their reality show.
It started last night, right? It's on Facebook. I think it started last night. I remember watching the preview for it. They are something. LeVar is built for reality TV.
Yes.
There is no doubt about it.
He is. And, I mean, the thing of it is that I remember, and it's obviously a totally different circumstance, but when Michael Sam was drafted by the then St. Louis Rams, and the Oprah network, the OWN network, was going to follow him around with camera crews, and everyone said, oh, we can't do this. This is a terrible mistake. This will create an enormous distraction. The Lakers are welcoming the Ball family reality show. They're excited for Lonzo's reality show.
And we've talked a lot about, obviously, LeVar, but listen, he can start a company. He can try and sell shoes. He can do all the things he's doing. And if there are consequences that come with it, then you deal with those. If there's a ton of money that comes with it, then bravo. That's the whole thing of this, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, is to have that successful company. Obviously, he wants his kids to do well. That's number one. But to have this company do so well that he can put it in everybody's face and have somebody want to buy him and his kids or that company along with it. Well, I don't think we're ever going to get there, but they're certainly enjoying it along the way.
He's taking his shot. They've got a reality show. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Whatever they want to do is certainly not my concern. But I will be very aggravated if LaMelo Ball is not allowed to play college basketball because his father made a shoe and put his name on it. That would strike me as a ridiculous application of a nonsensical rule.
The only thing I would say to that is if you knew it may happen and you did it anyway, then I don't feel bad for anybody. Now, LeVar Ball, you say what you want about him. You'd be foolish not to think you check into something like this. You look at, because you saw his response, and we're going down this road, I guess. So his response was, if he can't play, he can't play. I don't care. He'll still work out and he'll still get better about if he's ineligible in going to college. I think that's just for show. I think you look into some. He even said maybe in a couple of years they'll have changed the rule. You can get drafted right out of high school. But if he's looked into it and this is any kind of an infraction and they continue to do it, then I don't want to hear the complaining. I don't want to hear it because you know it's against the rules and you're openly doing it. Now, from what I've read, there are loopholes and things to where this may not affect him. And as I said, while LeVar Ball, I get on him for being loud and saying some of the dumb things that he said. But as far as a company and wanting to run a company, and do his thing, hey, more power to him. And part of that is checking things out. So I would have to believe he would have looked into that to make sure, because I don't think he wants his kid ineligible. I wouldn't think so unless that's, part of the keeping us in the headline plan. I don't know. I'm not in the guy's head. But that's what I'll say. I'm not feeling bad for anybody if you know that's against the rules and you do it anyway.
Mike, what you do realize is that LaMelo's eligibility fight will be the primary plot line of season 2.
There you go.
Of the Ball family reality show. We'll be following that thing daily, and they'll get Roger Cossack or someone like that representing him, and it'll be some TV-friendly lawyer representing him, and it'll all be good.
All part of the plan.
That's all of the nonsense of the day. Let's get to the real business of the day, which begins with you. We've got the tweet up. The Nuzzler has tweeted it. I retweeted it, and Golick will too. And that is using the hashtag MyCFP, MyCFP. Mm-hmm. Tweet us the name of the 4 teams that you believe will be the last 4 standing in college football this year. And we have that program that enables us at the end to figure out which 4 were mentioned the most frequently. And as a consequence, by the end of today's show, we will have the Mike and Mike audience 4 teams for the CFP. I'll pick mine at 7 Eastern, so an hour from now you will too, and so will Mikey.
Yep.
Who'll be here shortly. But for the morning, we'd like to hear from you. Hashtag MyCFP. Just name the 4 schools you believe will play in this year's college football playoff.
Look forward to that. And certainly we hear of 4 teams that are picked over and over by. So we want to – it's tough to go off the reservation on all of them, but certainly I'd like to on a couple of them, go out there on a limb a little bit.
Feels like everyone is going to have Ohio State and Alabama in there. And let's start off the top there because Ohio State at halftime last night in Bloomington – all of a sudden didn't look like that was such a lock. They were down 1 at the half to Indiana, and then, Mike, the second half happened.
Yeah, they were losing 14-13 at halftime. They outscored Indiana 36-7 in the second half. By the way, that even took a bit. With 5 minutes to go, Ohio State scored at 4:38 left in the third quarter to take the lead. They were losing 21-20 up to 4 minutes and 38 seconds left in the third quarter. But T.J. Barrett accounted for 4 touchdowns, 3 passing, 1 rushing. In the second half, he's 2 away from Drew Brees for the Big Ten record. Brees did it while he was at Purdue. So it's a team, a new offensive coordinator who happened to be the old head coach at Indiana, and Kevin Wilson, that took a little bit to get going, but they finally got going. They did it as well. How about this, Greeny? With a true freshman running back. Mike Weber was their top returning running back. He had a hammy. This kid, J.K. Robbins, who, by the way, is a true freshman. His senior year in high school, played 1 play, got hurt, missed the entire year. Comes to Ohio State, the running back Weber gets hurt. he's starting, but he was playing very well up to that point. You know, he probably would have tossed some time anyway.
Yeah.
He ran for 181 yards, first true freshman to start at Ohio State in the beginning of the season since Maurice Clarett, and he looked he's a short guy, but he's really, really stocky, ran well.
So Ohio State gets a season-opening win as college football is upon us, and the weekend continues tonight. 2 more top 10 teams are in action tonight. Mike, we will see Washington, which is number 8, and Wisconsin, number 9.
Yeah, Wisconsin, there are those that are giving them, a bit of an edge in the Big Ten as well as they host Utah State. And then Washington travels to Rutgers. A lot of people forgetting, I think, about Washington. The darling of the Pac-12 seems to be USC this year. Washington and USC don't play this year. Remember, that was a bad game for Washington last year, even though they still got in. They got beat by that hot USC team coming to the end of the year. But Washington, we'll see if they can, under the radar their way back in again on an easier schedule.
Off the top.
Before the deadline expired. So today is September 1st, which means that yesterday was the last day for baseball teams to acquire players if they were going to be eligible for the postseason. And right under the wire, we had a major deal. The Astros acquiring Justin Verlander from the Tigers. Verlander, Mike, one of the great pitchers of his generation, has a lot of postseason experience, and he'll be eligible to pitch in the postseason for Houston.
Yeah, and Houston, that staff before the break, basically in every major category, they were number 1 in baseball. Since the break, they have dropped, and Dallas Keuchel has been one of the reasons for that. Early on to before the break to after the break. Verlander, I mean, this second half so far, he's 5-2 with a 2.40 ERA. So that's and he's got a couple of years left. It's not a rental for a couple of months. He's got, I think Hembo said, 2 years after this year, 2 years and $56 million left. So that's a nice addition to the Astros.
And he had to approve it. He had a no trade, and he had 5 and 10, right? So he had to want to go there, and he did.
You know what's great about baseball, and I heard Mo Egger, who was filling in for my son this morning, say it. Baseball has a July 31st trade deadline, and all the big trades happen in August.
Right.
There's no more trades after July 31st, yet all the biggest trades happen in August. And I know
to
all
be
the
clear,
technical.
yeah. I know you know, but for the audience that does it, they have to clear waivers.
But doesn't it sound weird?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's a joke. It makes the whole thing look like a joke. Justin Verlander should not be changing teams to go to a contender with 3 weeks left in a 6-month season. I've always hated it.
Yeah.
It makes no sense, and they should change
Off
it.
the top.
I'm changing everything today.
You really are.
Clayton Kershaw is coming back, Mike. The question is, will he be better than ever?
Well, I mean, that is the question. He's going to come back. Alex Wood at some point will be back as well. They had a spate of guys go on the DL, but Kershaw, the biggest one there. He's still, can he get back in the Cy Young race? That's going to be, obviously they want him pitching like he pitches and then to pitch well in the postseason. He's thrown 141 innings. Only one pitcher has ever won the Cy Young when pitching fewer than 170 innings, and that was Rick Sutcliffe. Back in 1984, he did that. So, listen, the bottom line, that's the big picture. The smaller picture, obviously, is Kershaw, or the immediate picture is hopefully he's back to what he can be.
Off the top.
And finally, tennis at the U.S. Open. Another scare for Roger Federer, but he survives, as does Rafa Nadal.
Yeah, he gets his 80th U.S. Open match win. That puts him ahead of Andre Agassi. They were tied at 79. Jimmy Connors tops that list at 98. Both of Federer's wins, as you mentioned, has come in the 5th set. It's the first time in his career that he's won 5 setters in each of his first 2 matches at a major. Also just the 4th time he's needed a 5th set to win in the second round. The other 3 times he has not won. It happened in the Australian Open, the Wimbledon and French, and he did not win when that happened.
Off the top.
And that is Off the Top with us, Mike and Mike, on an extraordinarily busy Friday. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Last year, over 3 million drivers switched to Progressive. Call it, click today, find out if you could save. Did you have anything else on the Ohio State game you wanted to do?
One thing I'll say from Indiana side of it, obviously there was a lot on it for them. It was at Indiana, their head coach last year who resigned amidst the treatment of players. He could have had a bigger buyout. He took like $500,000 when it was like $11 million or half of that. So there was thought, is he admitting to that? And he left. Urban Meyer said he had done his own investigation on it and hired him at Ohio State. So there was that part of it. Indiana's been playing teams very, very tough. They really have. And what was very touching is they honored Lee Corso last night, who had coached at Indiana. I think one of the most memorable, and I forgot the year of it, they asked Lee, Lee talked about the amount of years he's been coaching, and they asked him his best moment. and he went into a game, into a play, and I'm sorry I can't remember now, but it was a last pass play, a last touchdown. He went through the whole thing, and again, it's like one of those, my God, these coaches remember every single thing about a play, and when he finished it, he teared up, he started crying, and he said, and it was my son who caught the touchdown pass. I mean, it was one of those stories where you heard it, and he didn't say that till the end, and you just got chills, and he started crying. I was like, oh, my God. I mean, it was an incredible moment. Very cool for Lee being there last night. I do like the way Indiana plays. It took Ohio State a little bit to get going. It was interesting, the two they do it with on offense. J.T. Barrett, who I feel has been at Ohio State for about 14 years.
Yeah.
And then this kid, J.K. Robbins, who is a true freshman, getting the start last night and running very well.
I mean, it's the history of J.T. Barrett there is so fascinating because you had Braxton Miller, and then who was going to be the Big Ten Player of the Year. Then he gets hurt, so Barrett comes in. He plays great. He breaks his leg. In comes Cardell Jones. He wins the national championship. Back they come. Yep. Jones wins the job. Then Barrett comes in, and he's obviously better. And now Barrett is going to break the record for most touchdowns accounted for in the history of the Big Ten Conference. So you're right. He has had a tumultuous tenure in Columbus. And it's worth reminding people, again, when you see these teams playing their first games, and this goes for Ohio State last night in a game they were expected to win easily at Indiana, and it goes for Alabama and Florida State and everybody else. College football, they don't play preseason games. So they're working out the kinks at the same time as they're playing these games. So to expect them to look perfect on August 31st is probably not realistic.
Absolutely, yeah. And true freshman, and so take me a minute to get this. It's J.K. Dobbins, not Robbins. J.K. Dobbins, I got to make sure I get it. And let me tell you.
The running back,
The running back, he started again. And right away they're running. One of the first passes was a real wheel route to him up the sideline. I mean, it's like, okay, you're good enough to be on the field. We're going to use you. And the kid ran well, nice spin moves. He plays well, gets extra yards, looks like he's going to be stopped behind the line and gets positive yards. So J.K. Dobbins, so good start for him.
All right, let's hear again from you using the hashtag MyCFP, MYCFP. Just tweet the names of the four schools you think will be the last four standing in college football. We'll do it all morning long. We'll see which four are mentioned the most frequently, and those will be the Mike and Mike audience final four. Okay, we have a major story in the NFL. Boy. And a lot of this now is, here's the way these things work. These stories don't write themselves, right? People have a reason to deliver information to our exceptional reporters who accumulate it. So in this case, whether that's Adam Schefter or it's Jim Trotter, who are the two primary reporters that we have on this story of where the Zeke Elliott suspension hearing has gone. But it looks so bad from the outside that it's difficult to imagine. I would recommend you go to Jim Trotter's Twitter feed. I asked the guys to sort of try and put it together and sum it up for me in a way that's easier to read because it just comes in a series of tweets. So if you are on Twitter, go to Jim Trotter's Twitter feed, and it's all there for you to see. Let me read it to you first off from the Wire story because it's a little neater and easier to comprehend. The National Football League Players Association alleges that there was a league-orchestrated conspiracy by senior NFL executives to hide critical information which would completely exonerate Zeke Elliott. And that is the reason why they have filed a request for a temporary restraining order in Texas, calling for the courts to block any suspension of Elliott that is ultimately upheld by the arbitrator Harold Henderson. Now, the backdrop of all of this is we don't know what Henderson's decision is going to be.
Right.
We expect it to come sometime over the weekend. So if Henderson's decision leaves any games of suspension alive, whatever the word is,
right,
leaves any games suspended.
Hard to think that it wouldn't.
Well, we overwhelmingly think it will, except for all this information might suggest you would think otherwise. Either way, they're immediately going to court because, again, they say there was a league-orchestrated conspiracy by senior NFL executives to hide critical information. And basically, here's what it is. Kia Roberts is the NFL's director of investigations. She testified at this hearing. Again, she is running this investigation, running point on the investigation of Zeke Elliott for the NFL. She testified that she was the only NFL employee who interviewed the woman who accused Zeke Elliott of domestic violence during the investigation. And she testified that she would not have recommended any discipline for Zeke Elliott based on what she found. She further testified that she was not included in the part of the process where the committee that investigated the matter recommended discipline to NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. The NFLPA says she concluded after reviewing all evidence that the accuser was not credible in her allegations of abuse. And the NFLPA says the withholding of this critical information from the disciplinary process was a momentous denial of the fundamental fairness required in every arbitration and, of course, does not satisfy federal labor law's minimal due process requirements. They also say that while Zeke Elliott himself did testify at the hearing, that the NFLPA wanted the accuser to.
They wanted a chance to talk to her.
And they did not get that opportunity. So, again, you're reading one version of the event. You're reading the NFLPA's side of the event, but these are in the documents. These are in the filings that they filed with the court in Texas. And look, just reading it on its face, if true, this is it changes my perspective on everything.
I mean, listen, you have a committee, and you have a committee that does an investigation, and then the committee, as we said all along, the committee talks to Roger Goodell, and then basically Roger Goodell takes their recommendation, or he can do what he wants, right? He can listen to their recommendation, and he can say, okay, thank you, I'm going to do this. They could recommend 2. He could say, I want 6. They could recommend 6. He could say, I want 2. Or he could listen to their recommendation.
I believe that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, yes, I believe regardless of what they bring to him, he can do whatever he wants.
He can do whatever he wants.
Hard to imagine that he wouldn't take into serious account.
I'm just throwing everything out there.
Right.
So, I mean, and I would imagine in this case there was disagreement among the people on the committee, right? Because somebody recommended 6 games, right? You would think. I mean, again,
you would think.
I don't want to assume, but if Kia Roberts didn't, as she said, I wouldn't have suspended him at all. Some of the others on that committee would have thought that there should have been a suspension, and then it's up to Roger Goodell to decide which way he wants to go. What looks bad, if in fact this is true, what looks horrible is you have the person that says, I'm the only one who talked to the accused, accuser, I'm sorry. I'm the only one who talked to the accuser. I didn't find her credible. I wouldn't have given a suspension at all. And then you weren't in the room with the others when you were presenting this to Roger Goodell. If that is all true, that looks horrifically bad. Not to say that even if she was in the room, they gave all kind of information out there, and then Roger Goodell still was able to do what he said. And I'm sure from the NFL side that they will say, listen, this isn't about one witness. This is about an entire investigation about what we're going on. But from now, legally where this stands, we would find out. I'm not a lawyer. We need to find out if there is a actual law case here. But again, if you read that and that is true from a public relations standpoint, it looks horrible.
Yeah. Well, we need to get the bottom line of it is we need to get to the bottom of this. So we will make all of our phone calls and we will try and get whomever it is that we can on the show for you today. First off, for some legal expertise, to your point. Yeah. And second of all, anyone from the NFL or the NFLPA who wants to come on and comment on this morning is 100% welcome, because I think our audience, the football fans of America, would like to hear this. Because the bottom line of it is that the National Football League has 2 major issues. One of them is head injuries, and the other is domestic violence, which they have just not been able to get right.
Right.
And at the end of the day, this was the one where it looked like they had gotten tough on it in a way that a lot of people liked. But if it turns out that the only person who performed the most significant part of the investigation was deliberately kept from telling Goodell what she found, we may have ourselves a major problem here.
The best of Mike and Mike.
All right, Mike and Mike, and it's a staple of our Football Fridays that we will have a little Mike Cubed going here as Mike Golic Jr. has joined us in our studio. And this week, I feel like we should begin with an apology to you, because I feel you were strong-armed into doing this, to be honest with you. We were having a conversation after the show yesterday, and for those who have not heard it, Mike Golic Jr. is this week filling in for Bomani Jones. So instead of working at 4 in the morning, you're working at 4 in the afternoon.
It's nice, man. It's nice.
And
wow.
The assumption made by every member of this staff, with the exception of the one who shares your last name, was that you wouldn't come in and do your Friday morning 6:30 a.m. hit when you have the delightful 1-week opportunity to sleep in a little bit. And it was your father who said, what are you talking about? Well, get him in here.
How many days have you slept in this week? 4, right?
Yeah, it's been nice.
Get your butt up and come in and do your job, right? You're supposed to be at 6:30 on Friday mornings. You're on our show, right?
Listen.
Would that change?
No.
Okay.
Because I honor my commitments.
Right.
I know during football season, those get upped, and I welcome that. I enjoy that. I enjoy being a valued part of our football coverage, college and pro here. Check out the Nickel Package NFL podcast. I'm doing Friday's version. It drops today. That heat. Anyway. I value my position in all this, but it was posed to me that, oh, yeah, if Junior has any loyalty, he'll come in. This ain't about loyalty. This is about me making sure that I can come in and remind you when you're wrong, because I've made a pretty good habit of coming in and checking you on here. So if you think you're going to strong-arm me into doing something, nah. I do this willingly and of my own accord.
I'm not strong-arming you. I raised you to take care of your responsibilities. To me,
that wasn't how it was phrased
to me. There was no question that you would be in today. And if you weren't, I would be disappointed and embarrassed to call you my son, and you would drop down to third on the list again of kids.
I live at third on the list right now. Most of this is just so I can go and wish our dog Tahoe a happy birthday after this. I'm going to go home and hang out with her
today.
Mike Golick Jr. is here with us. We're taking, again, your Twitter this morning, hashtag MyCFP. Just list the 4 schools that you believe will be the last 4 standing, the 4 teams that will make the college football playoff. Off the top of the next hour, the 3 of us will each make our picks, and at the end of the show today, we'll be able to calculate which 4 teams were mentioned most frequently amongst your Twitter, and we'll have the official Mike and Mike audience picks. But right now, we're in the middle of this discussion, and Mikey, you heard the end of it, of what the NFLPA is suggesting happened here. And so, look, there are 2 sides to every story, obviously. What seems to have happened, what the NFLPA clearly is saying, I'm trying to put this in as simple English as I can, and you guys help me if you think I'm not making it as clear as it can be made, that there was one person, one individual from the National Football League's investigative unit that interviewed the woman who accused Zeke Elliott of various instances of domestic violence. One woman who interviewed her, and she's the only one who did. That person, that woman, was not, that her recommendation after all of that was that she would not recommend that any discipline be levied towards Zeke Elliott, and that she was not able to meet with Goodell, that when the group went in and made the recommendations to Roger Goodell that they did, that she was not a part of that group. Now, the NFLPA is going to put in there, and of course that they did, the NFLPA makes it sound as though she was intentionally kept away from Goodell, which we certainly don't know that that's the case. We don't know exactly what their procedure is, but that she was not there when the recommendations were ultimately made. That's what the National Football League Players Association is suggesting, and thus they are ready to file a temporary restraining order if Henderson holds up any part of Zeke Elliott's suspension. Guys, what do we think?
If that part becomes true, because what I read yesterday, and I'd like to go back and confirm it before I say it with absolute certainty, but that idea was that testimony was still included in the 160-page document that was
between Kia Roberts and the accuser.
The accuser.
Right.
Was included in that 160-page document that we've all heard enough about at this point. And if the NFL is going to use that and its presence there as a basis for saying, no, we took that testimony into account, not directly, but into account. But if the NFLPA and the people they've got on their side can prove that she was intentionally kept out of all this stuff, that's a death blow in all of this for the NFL.
It is, and that's the crux of this, right? Because let's just say she was let into the meeting with the other committee members and Roger Goodell, and she told Roger, I don't think he should be suspended. The others could have said, we do, and he still could have been suspended.
Yeah.
It would have just been one of 4 or 5, however many voices were in there giving their opinion on the case. So that's what, when you get a group, the group doesn't have to all agree on everything. They give their findings. Roger Goodell makes his decision. So the worst, I agree with you. If they prove she was intentionally kept out of that to not tell Roger Goodell that I don't think he should be suspended at all, that's the public relations nightmare, and then we get into a legal part where we need legal help to find out if that carries anything.
Specifically from Jim Trotter's Twitter feed, the claim in the court petition filed on behalf of Zeke Elliott is that, quote, there was a deliberate decision to keep Roberts, the co-lead investigator, out of this critical meeting with the advisors as part of the overall conspiracy to conceal her conclusions from the commissioner, the player, the union, and the Cowboys. Now, that would then bring up the question, why in the world would the National Football League want to put together a conspiracy to suspend one of their most popular players?
Yeah.
You have to sort of suspend your disbelief if you don't think that makes sense. That was the part of the Brady part that I never really fully understood. Why anyone thought that Roger Goodell thought the best thing that could ever happen to the league was to suspend Tom Brady 4 games for deflating footballs. In this case, it is sensible to think the league has an interest in coming down hard on a domestic violence case, whether it's Zeke Elliott or the last guy on a roster, to publicly put forth a statement of getting tough on domestic violence where they have been perceived, and I think correctly so, not to be nearly tough enough in the past. That part doesn't I'm not suggesting they did it. I'm suggesting that part of it does not stretch credibility.
No, and that's the part of it that to me made sense a long time ago when we came off of, I believe it was Josh Brown and the gross mishandling of that situation with the New York Giants, which I think feeds into a lot of this in the way you mentioned. I said the NFL from this point on needs to err on the side of being borderline unfair to the players involved in the process in an effort to show, all right, we're going to come out and deliver on the promise that we very loudly made to people and said, we're going to give you 6 games with room for more or less, 6 games with fine print room for more or less. Yeah. But when you bang on the table and yell 6, you got to deliver 6.
Here's the problem. I totally agree with you.
I'm just saying that was probably their thought, or at least the thought process that I immediately came to, which just said, if you're a league that's so built on PR and a lot of bad PR right now, the best way to spin it is to find a place and say, you know what, come hell or high water, we're at least going to hammer this out of the gate.
And look, that goes all the way back, Mike, to when the Ray Rice thing first happened, and you and I said they should have just suspended him for a year.
I'll give you credit for that. You said throw him out for a year and let him fight it. And to quickly to Mike's point of 6 games, that's what I talked about the other day. How many examples did we give of
4?
Them? 4 examples of where they went less than 6 games. And I said, just give 6, just what you're saying. Just make it 6. Stick with 6. Don't start, because as soon as you start going down, I mean, that gives everybody room for interpretation on what's going on. Just make it 6. And then too many times they went less than 6.
Well, and that's what snowballed this whole situation, and why I think the PA side and really the court of public opinion in a place that's a very tricky spot to have a strong opinion one way or the other on this, because it's an issue of domestic violence. It's an issue that's so big and so pervasive in general in society. But when you look at it, the NFL's been so inconsistent in the way they've enforced that, or consistently under what we've expected, that now when you try to enforce it to the level you do, it looks like you're treating a certain player unfairly. With Josh Brown as the most recent example, it looks like it's a black and white issue with your treatment of Zeke Elliott. All of these things compounded.
Yeah, the problem that you have, in my opinion, because, Mikey, I agree with you. Throw the book at everybody. Go the maximum on everybody and let them fight it. And if they wind up fighting it successfully, so be it. The problem is that when they fight it, they're fighting it right back to you. If there was a true impartial mediator in all of this, then I think that would be a better system, because the NFL could say, listen, our findings are he's getting suspended for 6 games. The NFLPA could fight it, put it in front of a truly impartial person, and let that person make the decision.
Both sides
can
just say, well,
say, look, we did what we thought was right. Whatever the impartial advisor. Yeah. But now they come right back to the NFL, or their hand-chosen, or their hand-selected person, and Harold Henderson. So it doesn't appear to have any fairness connected to it, and that's why all of a sudden it winds up in court, which is where it seems this thing is destined to go.
And then that's my question going forward, because I don't know the law like this. Is this something that goes to court, or is this something that is just looks PR horrible for the NFL, or is it something that procedurally a court can actually step in and say, all right, NFL, you're wrong, and legally you're wrong, or is the court going to say, hey, you guys dealt with this in the CBA. You may not like the way they went about their business, but that's your guys' business. I have no idea.
Well, we just remember then everything I've seen, at least proceedings-wise, seems to mimic Deflategate, depending on how the ruling comes back on the actual suspension. If it's larger than the fine, what the NFLPA is comfortable with, it sounds like they're prepared to do a lot of the same things mechanically we saw with Deflategate.
They're going directly to court if he gets any games, and that means I believe at this point the overwhelming likelihood is we're going to start the NFL season with another instance of a very high-profile player on the field pending a court ruling, which they could do without at this point. The NFL would be a lot better served not having that.
Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling that you're safe to enjoy the things that matter most. ADT lets you take that feeling with you, whether you're at home, your business, or online. We help keep you safe with security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling for less than $1 a day. ADT. Home. Safe home.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Longtime listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
SportsCenter brought to you by DraftKings. Draft the perfect lineup in the free $100,000 one-week fantasy football contest at DraftKings. You can win $1 billion. Use the promo code Mike and play free only at DraftKings.com. Eligibility restrictions do apply. Check out DraftKings.com for all the details.
Mike and Mike Golick Jr. are here. Whether you're barbecuing with your friends or at your kids' tournament or just enjoying the holiday weekend, make sure you take your ESPN app with you. You'll stay up on everything happening in the game. Take ESPN with you everywhere. Download the ESPN app. Do it right now. Twitter reaction, 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. This is from Andy, and here's one that, look, I'm trying to be as fair as I can on all sides of this. Andy tweets, I'm tired of the NFL trying to be the law. They look horrible doing it. Let the law be the law, and the NFL should just focus on playing games and safety. The problem with that, Andy, on a day like this, it's easy to say that. The problem with that is when the legal system essentially does nothing with Ray Rice. I mean, what Ray Rice got from the legal system was, it wasn't actually nothing, but it was akin to nothing.
Right.
If the NFL just said, well, they didn't do anything, so we won't do anything, now the world stops and spinning on its axis. They can't win and they can't lose.
They get crushed the other way. They're really in kind of a no-win situation. So their thought is, after making certainly mistakes with it, and hopefully, we'll see if they're still doing it or not, coming down hard on that. It should have happened right in the beginning. And again, like most companies, your job isn't to fix domestic violence problems. That's not what you were in business for, but you have to. Now they're trying to deal with it, though. They're trying to deal with it, and they're failing at times dealing with it. So like you have said with the Ray Rice, and like Mike, you and I have said, man, just you got to just lay down a number and stick with it. And if you're gonna go down, you just go down swinging, saying, listen, we think we found evidence here. We think this is horrible. It's going to be 6 games. You want to fight it, you go ahead and fight it.
Once you start playing to the court of public reaction, your job is to show everyone how wrong you think it is. It's not to fix the problem. It's to show them how bad you believe this thing is, how bad whatever you're punishing is to that outside world. Because I remember we talked, I think Dominique might have made this point on your guys' show about how a long time ago when Goodell got this power, it was because the players were sick and tired of other players making the guys around the league look bad by issues that weren't necessarily always punished by the law, but at least created a stain. And why were players feeling that heat? Because it had to come from somewhere, so it probably was coming from the fans who were looking at it saying, wow, look at this league full of bad guys. And so all that response, all that comes back to, this is a response to what they're getting from the outside. Now, it may be too much of a response. You can say the NFL's got a responsibility to look at this and understand who they are and all of this and adjust that role accordingly as far as crime and punishment, but that train left the station a long time ago.
I think at the end of the day, Green, I had not agreed with this previously, but I think to where they are and how everything now, again, things end up in court because the NFLPA feels they do things wrong, and D. Smith is a litigator at heart. So, I mean, court is a place he's used to, but they seem to feel the league gives them reasons to go to court. That I lean to you. I mean, to your, and I think most people's side of this, have an independent arbitrator. Having it just, you know what? We're laying down the law hard. NFLPA, we think that's too hard. Go to somebody not associated with either and let them decide. And at least both sides can say, listen, we have done our job. We have done what we needed to do.
Yes, let's make that Straight Talk. Brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say in that vein. Actually, I completely forgot what I was going to say.
Well, there you go. I'm sure it'll come back to you.
I'll make a point. It'll come back to you, which is baseball did this. And the most famous case of it ever was Ryan Braun, right? So baseball went after Ryan Braun. The union defended him.
Backed him.
They backed him. He won on a technicality with an independent arbitrator. And I argued the next day, I don't think baseball came out of that looking bad. And people were saying this is a terrible loss for Bud Selig and baseball. I didn't think so. They went after him. They did what they thought was right. And if you put an independent person in there making that decision, and I've many times said I think it should be Jay Billis. Let Jay Billis do it because he knows sports and he knows law and he's a fair person. Let him be in there. Let him decide who's right and who's wrong, and you avoid all of the PR nightmare that comes from this.
I actually thank you for booing me now there. I remembered it when it comes to that idea of an independent arbitrator, because that was power that people always talk about. The players gave Goodell. And generally in this give-and-take relationship with the players in the league, you're not inclined to give back something that the other side willingly gives to you. But in this case, is it becoming detrimental enough to the NFL's cause to when it comes up in the next CBO negotiation or sooner, they say, you know what, this has stopped benefiting us. Us having this power is starting to work against us.
I don't think so, and here's why. They just gave Roger Goodell a 5-year contract extension. I think they think it's working just fine.
And I agree with you, but Mike's to that point, I understand that. You say, I wouldn't want to give up the power. I'd love to have the power to have it, but if it keeps being one thing after another where it's just maybe not working for you, man, you wonder, should we change this?
The best of Mike and Mike.
Here we go. Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. It's a football Friday. Put the word in the street, people. That's what Joaquin used to say.
Put the word in the street, people?
That was the old open that we used to do on a football Friday. Put the word in the street, people. It's a football Friday with Mike and Mike. Mike Golic Jr. is here. We're taking your Twitter using the hashtag MyCFP. Just name the 4 schools you think will be the last 4 standing for college football's national championship. And we have a program that at the end of the morning we'll be able to calculate which 4 were mentioned the most frequently, and those will be your picks. We're going to make our picks, and then we'll continue with our discussion of what's going on, the latest battle between the NFL Players Association and the NFL. Now it's over Zeke Elliott, and it's over the process by which he was suspended 6 games, and we'll see now that the appeal has been done. The NFLPA, if you haven't seen the latest story, stands ready to go to court the moment the decision comes back this weekend, assuming the decision is not to vacate all 6 games of the suspension. But we are ready with our picks of the final 4 teams in college football. And Golic Sr., I will allow you to go first.
You want all 4?
Give me all 4. Why not?
All 4. Well, I mean, I'm going to go with a couple of chalk ones that everybody is. I'm going to go with Alabama and Ohio State.
Is anyone not going with Alabama? I tried so hard
not with Alabama,
not to go with Alabama and Ohio State.
I've heard a few people going Wisconsin, going Penn State out of the Big Ten, but I don't know of anybody else not picking Alabama. You know, because usually the SEC is getting in.
And coming out of the SEC, one you could justify because you always look at the college football playoff every year, and I think outside, with the exception of 1 year, we've always tended to have a team that was preseason somewhere in the teen ranking-wise, I think as low as 12, which if you look there right now and you want to draft just off that, Auburn checks in at number 12 with an interesting situation. You bring back Cameron Petaway, that running back situation, a decent O-line, and add Jared Stidham at quarterback. They'll have a competent thrower there, presumably all season, and all of a sudden they start to look like a more viable option if you're looking for that reach outside of the top 10, but that's a tough place to go early on.
I mean, that's what most are definitely saying, that's the challenge that Bama may have will be that Auburn
the
game
Iron
right
Bowl.
Before, obviously, the SEC championship game. So I'm going to go.
And this week against Florida State.
Absolutely. So I'm going Bama. I'm going Ohio State. I am going USC as well. To me, it's going to be between USC does play Stanford. They play Texas again, but they play Stanford. They don't play Washington. So I think it's going to be USC and most likely Washington playing in the Pac-12 championship game. So I think it's going to come down to that. I like, Washington, I was riding them last year saying I like what I'm seeing out of them. You get your quarterback back. You're going to have some explosive offensive plays. By the end of the year, you had your leading sacker hurt. You had your leading tackler hurt on defense. But I like USC more. So I think they end up matching up in the Pac-12 championship. I think USC gets them, so I put USC in. My fourth one, and I'm leaving what many consider, if not the best, the second best conference out. People think the ACC is right there. I'm leaving the ACC out of this. I think Florida State loses this game, but I think they still have a pretty good season and knock off other teams. But I think they all knock one another off. I'm going out of the Big 12. They have a conference championship game this year, so we get that extra game. And I'm going Oklahoma State. I'm not going to Oklahoma. They play Oklahoma. They play one another at Oklahoma State this year. And so I'm going to lean to Oklahoma State. I want to get one kind of outlier in this thing. New coach, obviously a coach who's been there, and Lincoln Riley, youngster, but taken over that program in Oklahoma. I still think they're going to be a good program. But, Mason Rudolph, for Oklahoma State, we saw them in action last night. All those offensive weapons still back for them again. And you just know that conference. They score a ton of points, and everybody gives up a ton of points as well. That's going to be kind of my outlier. I'm going to say the Big 12, Oklahoma State. It's my fourth team in, so I have the ACC out completely. So I have Alabama, Ohio State, USC, Oklahoma State as my final four.
Mike Golic Jr.
I'd go Alabama as well. I'd concede that one. I don't think it's an overreaction, but I wasn't as confident on Ohio State going into the season as a lot of people. I'm leaving them out of this. I think especially if they're a little down this year, the Big Ten gets infinitely more competitive in a season where Michigan's looking to replace a lot. I know you're very high on Northwestern, but they can factor into this to some extent. How about this? In the history of the Big Ten, there's been 4 coaches to go their first 2 seasons with 10-win seasons back-to-back, and 3 of them are the current Big Ten coaches: Urban Meyer, Jim Harbaugh, and Wisconsin's head coach. Why am I blanking on his name right now? Paul Chryst.
Paul Chryst.
Yeah. The 3 of those coaches are 3 of the 4 coaches in the history of the Big Ten to open their careers at those schools with back-to-back 10-win seasons. So this is a hyper-competitive conference that I think might cannibalize a little bit this year. I'm waffling. I'm going to go USC right now just because I remember what they did to Washington in their defense last year. I remember how that looked and felt. And then I go Oklahoma and Florida State. I think Florida State and Alabama, one of those teams is going to be able to survive a loss, particularly Florida State, just because I don't know if Clemson's ready to be the team everyone thinks they're going to be. You're replacing your top rusher, receiver, and quarterback on offense. And I know they've done that in the past, losing Taj Boyd, who rewrote the record book before Deshaun Watson got on campus. But, man, there's a difference between that and the guy that finished inside the top 3 of the Heisman voting twice to end his career and ultimately got you over the hump. To me, there's just something else. There's a different level with that.
So if I'm looking at this, you're leaving the Big Ten out.
Yes.
Okay. I'm leaving the ACC out. He's leaving the Big Ten out.
Here's the thing. What I always do with this stuff, and it probably isn't the right way to do it, is I just look at when you have the big teams in each conference, who's got the games at home this year. So that was what led me to USC. Now, Washington on their side of the conference, they don't play each other, as you both pointed out, during the regular year. Washington has its schedule, and it is what it is. Yeah. USC, though, they get their what would project to be their 2 toughest games on their side of the bracket, which is Stanford and UCLA, both of those at home.
Right.
They do go to Notre Dame, the traditional game there. That's one of the road games. But I love USC. I love Sam Darnold. He's my future quarterback.
It's going to look great in Jets green.
Did you see the guy at the Jet game wearing the Darnold jersey? He had a Sam Darnold jersey with the number 14 made up.
Wow. That poor kid. He had to be watching some of those preseason games like, please, God, no.
I know. Listen, he could just stay. Peyton did it. But so I will take USC. You have to take Alabama. I think we are contractually obligated to take Alabama. It's just very difficult not to take Alabama.
Yeah, to try and
figure. It's Patriot-esque. They get the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah,
right?
it's exactly right.
And they could survive a loss this weekend because of the respect that their conference gets.
Right.
The SEC champion is going to get into the Final Four. It feels almost impossible to imagine.
Unless you have some crazy year where they have 2 losses and then you have
or 3. Alabama might be the one team, or the SEC might be the one conference, depending on how it plays
we haven't had a 2-loss team in the playoff yet, so you're right. If anyone's going to stretch that limit, it's going to be the SEC.
So I will put Alabama in. Mikey, I wanted to go with you on questioning Ohio State because I do believe that the conference is that good. Look at Penn State, how good they are. Look at Wisconsin, how good they project to be. Again, people will accuse me of just homer bias. Northwestern's a better football team than people recognize. And obviously Michigan, which I think Harbaugh has them back at a level where they don't totally rebuild. They just reload.
Right.
But Ohio State has a lot of those games at home again this year. So I couldn't find a pick I liked better, so I did go with Ohio State. And then finally, Mike, I agreed with you. I went with Oklahoma State just based upon who's got
we have
all
the
their
same
games at home.
Yeah.
Well, look, I don't believe Florida State can lose a second game and survive an Alabama loss. I believe the loser of Alabama-Florida, this is why I wouldn't play these games. And I know everyone yells at me, and everyone says I have no courage and I don't understand how players think. I get it. I don't understand how players think. But the reality is players are wrong. You want the best path to get into the college football championship game? Do what Washington did last year. It worked for them.
Or do what Ohio State did and be able to absorb not going to a conference title because you played such a tough team. I mean, the team that you're picking is quite literally the one that undermines your argument just because they got in off their strength of schedule. We can talk about strength of schedule. That was strength of playing Oklahoma on the road week 3.
Totally agree with you, but here's what you have to – here's the bet I'm making on myself going in. I'm going to bet on myself winning my conference. And I'm going to bet that if I don't play anybody early, and I'm going to not lose more games than other teams in my conference. Look, they tripped up last year. They lost the game at Penn State. They probably shouldn't have lost. Now, Penn State turned out to be a really good team, and that win was the beginning of what propelled Penn State to a great second half of their season. One way or another, I'm going to take Florida State out of this because I think that it's jammed up, and their game with Clemson is on the road. So they have to go to Clemson. They do get the U at home, which a lot of people like. They do get Louisville at home.
I like
the
U, too. I'm interested to see what they do.
A lot of
that
people
defense.
are picking the U, but boy, the U has got tough road games.
Yeah, they do. But, man, I love what's going on down there.
Tough road games, new quarterback, but you bring back all three of those freshmen that were starting for you at linebackers.
Yeah.
Woo.
Wow.
So it's a disaster scenario. Golick and I have the same four teams.
It really is.
Ohio
Good
State,
job,
USC, Alabama, and Oklahoma State. Keep yours coming. Again, use the hashtag MyCFP. Just the four schools you think will be there, and Patrick will continue to update that as the morning continues. We're Mike and Mike. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Pick from a range of coverage options with the Name Your Price tool to find a price that works for you. Back to what is our – go ahead, Mike.
Oh, no, I had one more note just because I thought of this in the way that we always talk about it. I think not even you guys talking about that, how the Patriots sort of set the standard in the NFL and how the Patriots have gone to that model of doing a lot of practices against other teams that seems to be starting to get picked up now during training camps. Those practices with the team you're getting ready to play that week. What has Alabama been doing week one of the last however many seasons?
Playing huge teams.
They've been going out and they've been playing huge teams. What was Nick Saban really vocal about this offseason? Now, you could maybe you could argue in a different world, but you guys love Occam's razor, and the simplest solution is usually the most correct one. Nick Saban and Alabama see value and understand what it means to go out and beat a team handily the way they have the last few seasons in that first game of the season and set a strong tone with the committee, with everyone else around college football to resonate out there. So if the best team, the one that's been in the college football playoff every year, has found some sort of success through this method, I'm inclined to believe that's more than likely going to become a trend.
And look what Ohio State last year, starting out with Oklahoma, and that win, we know what that did for them.
Going
this
out
year,
and playing,
this year they play Indiana, and now they're going to go play Oklahoma. I mean, so the first two, and IU has been playing teams tough, and they were beating them 21-20 until 5 minutes ago in the third. Now they go play at home against Oklahoma in that home-and-home series. So I'm with you. These top coaches with their top teams are saying, we're going to play them right off the bat. We're going to show you that we can do this, and that will pay off for them.
Because the best time to lose a big game is early in the season.
Yep. That's what I think they're counting on.
Yeah.
I think they're counting on having their cake and eating it too. If we win, they'll remember the win.
Yeah.
And if we lose,
forget it.
they'll say, you know what, that was early in the season. But again,
unless you get blown out.
I'll go back to Occam's razor, which is until I see a team with a 2 in the loss column get into this thing, I'm going to assume you can't do it, right? There have been 12 teams that have gotten into this playoff. It's such a small sample size.
It is.
And the committee turns over, so you don't know that it'll always be the same. So they are kind of shooting at a moving target, which is not the best way, I think, to do this. They haven't given – if I'm a coach, I think I'm frustrated. Mikey, tell me if you agree with this. If I'm a coach, I'm a little frustrated that you haven't told me exactly what it is I'm trying to accomplish. Do you know what I mean? Like, give me the goals. All right, here's what we're taking. This is what we want. We want to see a good schedule. We will take into account strength of schedule. We will take into account the eye test. We will take into account who you played, who you didn't play, quality losses, all that kind of stuff. But when everyone is kind of making up their own mind willy-nilly based upon what they want to do, I think it's easy if I'm a coach to say, I don't really know exactly what they're asking of me here. I don't know that that's a perfect system.
Well, it's not going to be a perfect system. You invited humans into the room to make it an imperfect system because that's what everyone claimed to want. Now, you can say that was fans claiming they wanted that and not coaches, but you kind of lose the ability to complain about that. And it's not like you're not given. We all know the criteria and what the committee's looking at, but interpretation is tough. You wanted a more human committee, so you could say last year, yeah, Penn State won the Big Ten, but no one really thought that they were better than Ohio State, right? Like, that was a close enough game. People would have argued that Ohio State, more than likely the best team coming out of the Big Ten last year. You could even make an argument in the Michigan because they outplayed Ohio State in that game, however you want to play that. And so the committee looked at that in conjunction with what Ohio State did schedule-wise and all these things and factored it in accordingly. Like, it's not a simple enough process the way they come to those 25 teams and that ranking system to say you've gone out and doctored it because of some sort of, weird arbitrary way of making decisions.
Well, you went to Dallas last year with a group of analysts to go through what they go through, what that group goes through. Did they give you hard, fast lines on what they're looking for when you were going through that process?
They gave you criteria that they wanted to judge on. One of it said that, it talked about the importance of a conference championship. They talked about, if a non-conference champion is going to supersede one of the teams that is a conference champion, there has to be a, clearly identifiable way of saying, all right, this team is better. There's got to be some other way of doing it. And just knowing, like, you pick the teams in groups of 3 and 4 on down the list, and you go back through and there's votes and revotes. Like, these are painstakingly deliberated over decisions. Now, there's a human element to that room that you cannot deny, and so that's going to factor into this. But again, that's one that you invited into the bedroom, so you can't get mad now that it's laying there looking at you.
All right, we're Mike and Mike. It's a funny way of putting that. Mike Golic Jr. in with us here. And again, keep your tweets coming all morning long using the hashtag MyCFP. Top story today, once again, the National Football League Players Association stands in the same position that we frequently find them, ready to go to court with the NFL over what they perceive to be unfair treatment of one of their players. In this case, the court petition filed on behalf of Zeke Elliott with claims, according to Jim Trotter on his timeline, that neither the commissioner nor his 4 advisors were informed that the co-lead investigator, and again, according to our information, the only investigator who actually spoke to Zeke Elliott's accuser, that Goodell and his advisors were never informed that she, the investigator, recommended no suspension because of a lack of credibility and evidence to support her claims. When one advisor asked what conclusions the investigator had drawn from evidence gathered, Lisa Friel, again, this is Lisa Friel, this is not the woman who was doing the investigating, but this is Lisa Friel who's in charge of the department, evaded answering directly, only admitting that she had concluded that one of the 5 claimed incidents was not credible. The petition claims that Friel did not reveal the conclusion that all of the allegations were not credible and could not be supported, and instead gave the impression that the other allegations were found to be credible. Here's where they start using wording that, of course, is very much meant to skew the discussion. There was also a deliberate decision to keep Roberts, the investigator who did the contact with the accuser. There was a deliberate decision to keep her out of this critical meeting with the advisors as part of an overall conspiracy to conceal her conclusions from the commissioner, the player, the union, and the Cowboys. This obviously is the kind of stuff that you put into something when you're taking it to court, and you want to make it sound like the other side has some vast conspiracy against
right.
you.
Yeah, when you're using the words deliberate and conspiracy, you are throwing the dart out there. You're going to have to. If they do go to court, going to have to prove that, correct? And from the NFL side, the NFL is basically saying that, hey, this case isn't built on one witness. This case is built on all the investigation that went on, and that's where then we got recommendations from those people to come to the conclusion. So that's going to be their answer to this. And again, I have no idea where something like that goes in court, because when you say, conspiracy and you say deliberately did something, is then the onus going to be on the PA to prove it, right? This is so let's take this. Let's say there's still a suspension and they go to court. This is when we're going to need to get some legal people on here to say, okay, what happens now? You don't like the way it went. You think something procedurally went wrong that we can get them on legally. Then do you have to prove it? What do you have to show to prove it? It's going to get really, really interesting. A place that I'm sure the NFL wants no business going, given where it's been the last few years.
Here's the problem that the NFL has, and that is the inconsistency in the way they have applied this policy. So Mikey, I think, said it exactly right earlier. The one number we all associate with the NFL's domestic violence policy is the number 6.
Right.
As you said, in little tiny fine print, which you, Mike Golic Sr., said yesterday you think they should get rid of, and frankly, I agree. I understand why you leave yourself some room, I would think, to err on the side of more, like in a
I'd
case
say
where
6
you want to throw the guy out.
6 and it can only go up.
Yeah, you left room for nuance, though.
Yeah.
They left room for nuance, and they've used nuance.
Yep.
Because here's what we have had in the past. We've had 4 other instances, at least 4, since the policy was put in place.
The new policy, yes.
Where they have ruled differently. Josh Brown, famously last year, arrested on misdemeanor domestic violence charges, suspended 1 game. Quincy Enunwa, arrested and charged with simple assault, suspended 4 games. Jonathan Dwyer, arrested at the team facility for headbutting his wife, suspended 3 games. Junior Gillette, arrested and charged with misdemeanor simple battery domestic violence, and suspended 2 games. All of these since the policy was enacted in 2014. So the number 6 has not been one they have stuck to religiously. No. So what I assumed was that Zeke Elliott's side of this was going to say they haven't stuck to 6 in the past.
Why are you doing 6
there
here?
There are all kinds of questions that surround the credibility of the accuser here. How did we arrive at 6 here? It now sounds as though they're throwing the procedure directly into the middle of all of this.
So now you're hiding stuff from us, not letting us talk to people we want to talk to. So that gets to the procedural part of this where, in my opinion, just 6. Just stick with 6.
And that nuance that you were looking for, if you flip the timeline pyramid of all this on its head and you redistribute where you punish differently, the NFL could have had room for nuance in this case because there are so many things we don't know.
Right.
And that's what's tough about all of this on the outside, because look at all those other cases. Go back to Ray Rice. Video. Very easy for people, especially all of us on the outside, to look at this and say, bad. Give it the most you can give it.
Right.
Greg Hardy, we had that grisly painting of a scene where she's thrown onto a bed of guns, and we see the pictures,
right,
and we see the bruises. We see all these things. Even Junior Gillette, that came from a video that we all saw of him on a beach with a belt, supposedly. That was what we were given to believe. All of those instances where you've got evidence enough that you can show the public and say, man, we're going to punish this as harshly as we can, so that when you finally get to a place like this where there seems to be such a dispute about what actually went on and what's the specifics of all this case, that you could apply some of this nuance, it's too late and you've painted yourself into a corner.
We need legal analysis, and here to provide that is our friend Will Cain, who, when he is not stirring up all kinds of conversation all across the ESPN networks, is actually a lawyer. And so we're going to put that to use this morning. How are you, Cain?
I'm good. What did you say? Some people like him. Some people can't stand him.
I think he said most can't stand him.
No,
I think that's what he said.
Go back and play the tape back.
I think it was most.
Once again,
maybe all can't stand him.
You know what, Will? I would like to put you on retainer, and I would like to use your services to sue Golick here, because that's completely inaccurate, is what I said. Okay, all kidding aside. So we have tried as best we can this morning to set up what it is the NFL Players Association for our audience is doing. Can you, cutting through as much legalese as possible, explain what the union is planning to do here and why?
Okay. First, there's the non-legal analysis, which I've heard you reference several times this morning, and I think it's probably the most important, the non-legal analysis. Why would the NFLPA and Zeke Elliott and Jerry Jones file a lawsuit before Harold Henderson comes back with his whatever it may be, ruling on a reduced suspension, whatever it may be in an appeal? I believe that the reason you would file that today is to influence Harold Henderson's outcome. That by filing this today and putting this evidence out on Front Street, as people say, all of this, I shouldn't say evidence, allegations, all of this testimony, all of this pretty damning stuff in Zeke's complaint that was filed, putting it out now puts, I believe, Harold Henderson, and let's be honest, in parentheses, Roger Goodell, in a real bind. You're in a situation now where your choices are pretty stark. Reduce Zeke Elliott's suspension to 0 right now. And the reason you would do that is to avoid a couple things. A horrible PR battle over the next 6 months. Possibly reversing what is an amazing ruling for Goodell in the NFL in the Brady case. The Brady case gave Goodell essentially Superman powers. Whatever you want to do, you can do. It will hold up in the court of law. You don't need to be right. You don't need facts on your side, and your due process needs to be minimal, meaning was this a fair process that you went through to get to this suspension? Minimal at best, because the CBA gave you that power. That's what Goodell came away from the Brady case with, and that's what could be put at risk in a Zeke Elliott lawsuit. So what Henderson and Goodell have to do over this weekend is go, is that worth it? Do we risk that power? Do we risk bad PR to put up this fight, to have this fight? Or do we go 0? 0, Zeke. It's down to 0. If it's 0, that's huge. Somebody's head has to roll. And the way Zeke's complaint sets it up, it would be Lisa Friel, the director of investigations, because it says in there that Goodell himself wasn't made aware of all of this stuff. The contradictory evidence wasn't even presented to Goodell. It, I think, sets up Lisa Friel as the potential scapegoat. I'm not saying she is. I'm saying the complaint is suggesting that she is.
I don't see any way from the NFL side that they give into this. After going through what they went through with Brady and having that power and that huge win there for Article 46, I can't imagine that they would just say, we're going to go down to 0. You know, we did this wrong, we screwed up, and then admit that when they think they have such a strong position if they were to end up going to court again.
The only reason, Golick, okay, I'm going to agree with you that because I said what they came out of the Brady case with was ultimate power, and it would suggest that Zeke would lose any legal battle. I still am skeptical, as Michael McCann, who you pointed out, is a sports legal expert. I'm skeptical of Zeke's ability to win a lawsuit. The issue, and you said cut through legally as best I can, it's about process. It's not about guilt. It's about whether or not there was fundamental fairness in Zeke's investigation and suspension process. And if the director of investigations, Kia Roberts, the only person to talk to Tiffany Thompson, she did so 6 times. She's the only person to talk to Tiffany Thompson. If Kia Roberts comes away with serious credibility concerns and recommends 0 games as suspension for Zeke Elliott, and that's ignored, that's pushed to the side, that's not even brought to the appeals hearing, that's not put in front of Roger Goodell, if that's the case, there are legitimate concerns about fundamental fairness. But back to you, Golick. Yes, it doesn't seem to matter. Goodell has ultimate power, but that's what he has to avoid, having that power reduced.
So that's the question, fundamental fairness, however that goes. If she wasn't in the room, was she not in the room, but the people in the room, did they say what she said to Roger, or was it completely left out? So let's go the full way and say it was completely left out. Is that something legally that could hit the NFL, or will the courts just say, gang, you gave them the power? They had their committee. They had their ruling. They went through their procedure, and they came up with the 6 games. What do you want us to do? That's Article 46, man. That's what they're going to do.
That's a really difficult legal question for me to answer. The truth of the matter is, I think that sounds like the definition of fundamental unfairness.
Right.
I personally think that sounds like a process that was not fair. That being said, I know what happened in Deflategate. I know what happened with Brady, and I know that Goodell has ultimate power. And I don't know that fundamental fairness actually has any kind of objective definition that matters what Will Cain thinks, that truthfully only matters what a court thinks. It barely has to satisfy anything to satisfy the CBA.
Mike and Mike, Will Cain putting on his legal analyst hat here and helping us. Here's what's in the court petition filed by the players, Mike, specifically with regard to what you're saying. Again, this is their version of the event. I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm saying this is the Players Association version of the events. They said that when an advisor, one of the people who was making this decision, asked Lisa Friel what conclusions the investigators had drawn, meaning the one woman you just referenced,
Kia Roberts,
what conclusions she had drawn.
Right.
According to the players, Lisa Friel evaded answering that question directly and only admitted that she had concluded that one of the 5 claimed incidents was not credible, which gave the impression, it says here, that the other allegations were found to be credible. They then used the words, there was a deliberate decision to keep Roberts out of this meeting. Do they have to prove that?
How do you prove
and if
that?
so, how do you prove that?
Deliberate and the conspiracy. I mean, now is it on the NFLPA? And by the way, I'm all for the NFLPA. Keep screaming and throwing things up. But at the end of this all, what do they have to prove here? And how hard is that going to be?
You know, as a matter of common sense, conspiracy is rarely ever conspiracy. I mean, it usually requires entirely too much competence on the part of everyone involved to truly be a conspiracy. And in legal terms, it would be something like a meeting of the minds that we're all going to do this with this certain goal in mind. I don't know. I don't know about conspiracy, Greeny. I just think the question is this: was the process unfair? It looks like that to me. But Brady suggests to me, Deflategate suggests to me, our concepts of fairness, any of us out here, do not matter. They do not matter.
Here's what I'm imagining. Again, I'm just guessing here, that the NFL could look the world in the face today and say, this is the procedure. The investigators do their investigating. They present their report to someone whose job it is to be in that room and present it to us. That someone is Lisa Friel in this case. But the idea that the one person who actually interviewed the accuser 5 times or 6 times is not in the room is not a violation of the process. It's the way the process works. Investigators investigate, and they put together their information, and someone else presents it to us. All of us are looking at this like a bunch of, uneducated, in this area people and saying, well, why wouldn't the one person who talked to her be in the room with Roger?
Exactly.
Can they not argue, well, that's just not the way the process works, and it's totally normal?
Of course they can, and they probably will. That sounds like the case that the NFL would put on. We don't have to have in front of us every single piece of evidence, every single person that accumulated the evidence. We in this room, as we pass down the suspension, sit here and analyze it all in front of ourselves right now. Look, I think this is the other thing. Think about this. I see 3 paths. 1, a complete reduction to 0, in which case someone's head must roll.
Right, agree with that.
The reason that you go down to 0, to answer Golick's question, is to avoid losing power you established with Brady. 2, burn the boats. Have the same legal fight that you had with Brady. Establish and maintain and protect the power that you have had, and it will stay 6, and they fight this all the way to the end. 3, plead with Jerry Jones. in the next 2 days, Harold Henderson and Roger Goodell come back and go, what if it's 3? Can we just all put this behind us with a 2 or 3 game suspension? Yeah, we don't want to have this fight. Yeah, this is ugly. Would you accept 2 or 3, that this is an opening bid in a negotiation?
The best of Mike and Mike.
Will Kane is in our studio. Josina Anderson just tweeted a few minutes ago that a former lawyer said to her, quote, media gets too caught up in the details. NFL still has broad authority to review evidence as they see fit. I think we all view it that way. I think the question is, does the league have the stomach or the desire to have a huge, very public fight over something like this involving one of their most popular players on their most popular team? But they had exactly the same circumstance 2 years ago with Brady,
who's
and they
more
did.
popular than Brady?
Right.
I mean, it's exactly right. I mean, the Article 46 got called into question. As I said before, how long did it take before we never mentioned deflated footballs anymore, and it was just now about the procedure involved and all that fight there? I can see why the NFL would want to protect it, but do you go so far as to protect it by going down to 0 games to not have the fight at all, or, as you started to allude to, have a negotiation with a Jerry Jones and say, hey, if we drop this a few games, can we kind of push this to the side and start our season?
Please, Jerry, is there a way we can make this go away? Please, is there some compromise we can find?
Well, so Jerry is the guy, all right? So Jerry Jones, who is and the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, it should not be forgotten that in this battle between the NFLPA and the NFL, he does not line up behind Zeke, or at least his natural position would not be behind Zeke. His natural position would be behind Goodell. He's the owners. He's one of the people who is suspending Zeke Elliott for 6 games. But he is also on the record as having said in just the last few days, quote, it's a very complicated issue because you have no evidence here. That's not Goodell saying it, but it's close to Goodell saying it. At least it's someone on that side of it saying it. So, Will, where, if at all, does that factor into all of this?
Well, I think Jerry's guilty of only a slight overstatement when he says there was no evidence here. If you track Jerry's comments going back a year, I believe a year ago he said there would be nothing to see here. There will ultimately be no suspension. When he was on, I believe, a preseason game in the last few months, he was asked something about the Zeke Elliott suspension, and he said there'll be nothing for the domestic violence case. There's some other stuff going on. And the belief is that Jerry had been talking or had heard from Kia Roberts or heard about Kia Roberts' investigation. She was the lead investigator in this case and knew that there were serious credibility concerns about the accuser in the Zeke Elliott domestic violence consideration. And so that's one of the reasons he's so furious coming out of a 6-game suspension, is that he had been led on for a year, either through direct knowledge or through, rumors that there was nothing to see here. And then we do a reverse. We do there's something to see. In fact, there's 6-game suspension to see. If I could, I want always in these legal cases, I'd like, how can we get it like in an understandable bite-sized thing? This is what I would say. There's 2 different courts. There's the court of public opinion and there's the legal court, right? In the legal court, you have this going on. Was this process fundamentally fair to Zeke Elliott? Suggesting that the answer is no, you have the fact that Kia Roberts, the only person to interview the accuser, 6 times, by the way, her recommendation of a 0-game suspension was ignored or not used. She was, as you said, barred from the suspension hearing. She was seemingly not involved in this process beyond a direct investigation. Beyond that, her notes were not made available. Beyond that, according to Zeke's complaint, this was not all passed up to Roger Goodell. That is all to suggest it was not fundamentally fair. But staying in the court of legality, the justice system, weighed against all of that is Tom Brady. Weighed against all of that is Deflategate. And Deflategate says, who cares? You collectively bargained all of that away. You don't have any power. Roger Goodell has all the power. Whatever your sense of fairness is does not matter. Roger Goodell is the beginning and the end of fairness. You collectively bargained it. Goodbye.
So that's an excellent explanation, and I think everyone gets that. Here's the thing I always ask, and that is, doesn't there have to be some limit to that? Now, just reasonable people would look at that and say, I'm not suggesting that's what's happening here, but reasonable people could look at that and say that Roger Goodell could then walk in and do basically anything he wants in the absence of any reason to do it. And obviously that can't be the case, right? There has to be some limit to that. There have to be labor laws that govern this in some way that suggest that some quote-unquote fundamental fairness be involved. Now, this may not get anywhere near that. I can see a million arguments that the league could make on their own side in this. But wouldn't there be some place we could get to that the courts would have to side with a player if there was such blatant, if in some way they could show that that the process was so unfair that any reasonable person would say this cannot stand.
If you were suspended tomorrow from ESPN, Greeny, would you have any recourse to fight that suspension?
I don't know.
I don't think you would.
No.
You would not. The only difference between you and an NFL player is the union that represents them and the collectively bargained agreement that supposedly sets up some process. What we found out through Tom Brady is that process doesn't have to be very just, doesn't have to be very fair. Roger Goodell basically has all that power. But I want to say this. That's only the legal court.
Yeah.
There's the other court that I suggested, the court of public opinion. And it matters. It matters a lot. And that's the court I believe the NFLPA and Ezekiel Elliott are playing in right now. When you file that complaint before Harold Henderson comes back with his suspension, whatever it may be, reduced, same, taken down to 0. When you file it before that, the court of public opinion is the one you are trying to influence. And by extension, Harold Henderson. And Roger Goodell. You are saying, look how ridiculous this process is. By the way, we all agree it's ridiculous. Doesn't matter, Roger Goodell has the power, but we say, this looks pretty bad. And you were trying to then have the tail wag the dog of Harold Henderson and Roger Goodell go, gosh, we can't have this going like this in the court of public opinion. We can't be losing like this. How can we make this go away? And they still have an opportunity because there's still time for Harold Henderson to do something with that suspension and negotiate or reduce it in some way that satisfies Jerry Jones and the public.
So in under the minute we have left when we're asking everybody what their Final Four is or talk about a game and then it's who wins the game, what do you think happens here? What do you think? What directions does this go?
I think Harold Henderson comes back with a much more reduced suspension than any of us anticipated, and Jerry Jones and Zeke Elliott take it to make this go away in a shorter amount of time, 2-3 games. I think it's the easiest path forward.
First time skydiving? Sure is. Okay, you just open the door like this and you jump. Oh, wait. Should we be like in tandem? Tandem? That's a great idea. Are you a certified instructor? No, but I love parachutes and I love people. Here we go.
You wouldn't take chances with an uncertified skydiving instructor. Don't do it with your finances. Find a certified financial planner professional today at letsmakeaplan.org. CF